Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Doctor.
Hi, good afternoon. Before we,
Good afternoon.
before we delve
Yeah,
into our
this is
topic this
Oliver.
evening, yes, our topic this evening
Absolutely.
is gender-based violence, not victims but survivors. As usual, we have guidance from Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to humbly wait your help. And so our consultant, Gender Affairs, consulting for Gender Affairs is Jeannie Oliver, and who is also director of Marian House, our only professional content services here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Greet our listeners. Ms. Oliver?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. My friend and relative,
Yes.
cousin,
Yes.
thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, cousin. Thank you. And Mr. Gerald Williams, our financial analyst, our father, I should say, not my father, but also my relative, all the way there in the Bailiwick of Jersey. Greet our listeners, please.
Yeah, good afternoon to all the listeners of the News Network. Thank you, Dr. Charles, for the opportunity to reach out to our people, whether they are in St. Vincent or throughout the diaspora. And also welcoming Miss Olivier as well, to take the opportunity to join the platform. So welcome both yourself and Miss Olivier, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much. So, greetings, one and all. Germany, I understand, is on the line. Um, all the way down to South America. I understand persons in Canada are locked on, folks in the United States of America, right here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on mainland St. Vincent and in the Grenadine Islands, in the Lower Grenadines, Northern Grenadines as well, welcome, Barbados, St. Lucia, Dominica, um, Grenada. We have persons as well from some African states and other places right around the world. Welcome again. Congratulations to those who have had a birthday today, to those who have had the birth of a child or children. We also say congratulations to those persons who are celebrating their wedding anniversaries, and also condolences to those who are bereaved. We have come to the end basically of our presentations for women and women-related topics throughout the month of May. Next month, the month of June, we will be focusing on issues that relate or touch on concern the lives of men. And yes, we are going to have one or two programs that women will give their perspectives on some of the topics that we will deal with them. But today, to bring this to a close, the issues of gender-based violence, domestic violence, and so on, we thought it best that we will look at the topic from this standpoint, that we are not victims but survivors. Jimmy, I just want to take this time to talk about victim, who is a victim and who is a survivor. The narrative told me that a victim is a person that was harmed, that was injured, or was killed as a result of a crime, an accident, or other event or action. So it's a person who has been tricked or duped as well. And a survivor is a person who survives, or especially a person remaining alive after an event in which others have died, or the remainder of a group of people or things, a person who copes well with difficulties in their life, a joint tenant who has the right to the whole estate on the other's death. But for us, I believe I will be the first one to raise my hand to say that I'm not a victim.
I'm a survivor.
I'm a survivor.
We are survivors.
Yes, there's a song. I am a survivor. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, we are survivors indeed. I don't know if Mr. Williams wants to join us in that today, whether he's a victim or a survivor. Mr. Williams?
The line is just going in and that.
Okay.
Properly.
Yeah.
So
So I
I
repeat that.
managed to hear everything.
Uh-huh. You're saying that whether, with respect to gender-based violence, whether you could say, you could join with us and say, I am a survivor, I am a survivor. You know that song?
Hello?
Do you know this song, that you're a survivor instead of a victim? That you're not a victim, but you're a survivor. Forget song. Are you a survivor of
Form of violence.
any form of violence in your life?
I find it really going. I have problems to hold it properly.
Oh, you're not hearing us properly. Okay, do you want us to
Not
go
properly.
slower?
Or is it the reception?
After a while, sometimes it tends to clear up. But
Okay,
I think it does. The last week was a similar,
okay,
similar issue, so the focus there.
right. So remember today the focus is on gender-based violence, not victims,
But survivors.
but survivors. So I was given a narrative on who is a victim and who is a survivor. So I was wondering, which category would you put yourself in, a victim or a survivor?
Honestly, it's really not good.
Okay. We are patient with you today
Yeah.
because I know you're very far away. Alright. Okay, so we are not hearing you that well, but we know you will be with us. We know you're coming back to us there. So from what did we survive after we have been a victim? Because before you are a survivor, you must be a victim to something, some incident.
Huh.
You want to go first?
Yes, no problem. First, second, third, I'm a survivor. And I have survived physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse. I have been at the hand of a very intimate partner. And I mean, it was not easy, but these are the various types that I have been exposed to. It was not just the cuff and the box and the blows, but it was also withdrawal of sex, you know. And you also had the financial, and because of the profession that the perpetrator would have functioning, the structure, the type of structure that he would have functioned in. There was also this structural aspect as well. And because when you combine all of these, of course you have to be able to experience some sort of psychosocial, some sort of psychological, emotional impact.
Mr. Williams, are you picking us up now? Mr. Williams? Okay, so we are not hearing Mr. Williams as yet. But at any time you can just break through and speak with us. So we're having a bit of connectivity problem there. The Council of Europe Istanbul Convention mentioned some types of violence, forms of violence, and you would have touched on a few: psychological violence, physical violence, sexual violence, including rape, sexual harassment, aiding or abetting an attempt, unacceptable jurisdictions, justifications rather for circumstances and situations here in St. Vincent and Grenadines. So you're saying to me that what would appear from the outside as normal marriages by the church, by the communities, within our professions, we would have walked similar paths where partners thought in their own head, and that is what I'm trying to help some of our men folk. I'm not bashing them, but I'm just trying to help some of our men folk understand that they have had a problem in their childhood, and to cope with whatever problems they have had and have experienced, their lived experiences, they brought that into
Relationships,
marriages.
yes.
They brought that into marriages. How they cope with their own stress, levels of stress, how they cope with their own reality of self. All of those things were projected onto partners. I'm talking to women who are probably drinking a glass of water right now, or a man who has a cigar or a cigarette between his fingers. I'm talking to young girls and young boys in St. Vincent and Grenadines and throughout the rest of the world. And I'm saying that we must come together to say no to gender-based violence.
Yeah, because the gender-based violence is not just the physical and the sexual and the emotional and so on. We have the verbal,
Yes.
which includes the threats.
Yes.
Don't do this if you do this or do that.
Yes.
Chop you up in pieces
Yes.
and knock you over and throw your hair.
Yes.
The coercion and the manipulation that is meted out to us. But thank God, we are not victims, we are survivors. I am a survivor.
No,
Right?
thank you.
And we have to realize that we have, because we have so experienced, that we have a critical role to play in our Vincentian society and in our Vincentian homes.
Correct. I want to give you a little taste, a little bit of Mr. Williams is there with us? Is he there? Mr. Williams?
No, you're not there.
All right. You're listening to Belle the Nation. Belle the Nation coming to you live from St. Vincent and the Grenadines with the compliments of BayhillNews.net. Belle the Nation, the biggest conversation from this side of the globe. 1-784-529-8518. Or as usual, some persons are sending me texts. They do send me messages. Please do. And I will read your text messages, as well as some folks would have heard about this topic before and they have actually sent in some comments or questions. So call us or write to us at bellednation@gmail.com or 1-784-529-8518, or you can text. You can text me. You know my number, 4913923. Ladies and gentlemen, just a taste of a situation. Remember, I'm not a victim, but I'm a survivor. So my first threat, you did mention threat, and that triggered in my mind the situation that I was faced with. I sat on the bed. It was a normal, yes, validation. Thank you. It was one of those normal, to me, it was a normal day, and the quarrels would have lasted from the night and then the early morning and so on. I said, look, and again I'm putting in a caveat here, I'm not saying a threat to anyone, I'm merely repeating what was said to me. I will kill you. At the time the children were smaller, I will kill the children. I will burn the house down. And then the person said what they were going to do to themselves, and that was to kill themselves. It's the first time I'm talking about this publicly, so it's emotional. Because when you get married, or you are in a lived experience with a partner for 10 and 15 and 25 years, you don't expect to hear that.
Love and support is what is supposed to be meted out.
You don't expect to hear that. I did make a complaint to one or two persons, and they thought that it was the norm because of their own particular circumstances and situations way back when. And they said, well, look, a significant other in my life said, my partner had pulled a cutlass, and I had pulled a knife. What you call those? I don't see those these
Switchblade, ice pick.
Yeah. And we had squared up against each other to fight. And you find a lot of this in the rural communities. In St. Vincent and Grenadines. This is not the way to deal with problems. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have seen over the past successive weekends. And even before that, we have seen and lamented and cried and held candlelight vigils and
Demonstrations,
and
picketing.
marches and picketing and so on. The situation has to stop, otherwise if we continue to beat upon one another, we will not have a St. Vincent to call home. We will die at the hands of others. I am speaking out because there are many persons who have not believed in me because a partner who dresses in a tie with a jacket and who would have held a job and a respectable position in the society appears to be a different person.
You know, as a victim then,
Right?
when you tried to speak, everybody thought that you were lying.
But of course,
Because these people, they don't look like that.
they don't.
And they don't do those things because they have a certain status.
Certain
It's
standards.
standard in society.
Exactly.
You come from a certain background,
Correct.
right?
They come from a certain family. They hold a certain position in church.
Yes,
They may have been a minister of government.
yes.
Or they may have been a minister of the gospel.
Yeah.
And they stand behind
High
the
esteem.
pulpit.
They're being held in
Yes.
high esteem,
And
wherever situation
yes.
that they find themselves in, and society must bow down to them,
Correct.
so they can do no wrong.
No
So
wrong.
when you speak, you're the liar.
Correct.
You're the big bad wolf. And they don't do that. They're so quiet. I am a survivor.
I am a survivor. I am a survivor. I am a survivor. And I tell
Yes.
you, women, indeed, this is BayHillNews.net. This is Bell the Nation from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. My name is Doris Charles, the hostess of this program, and I'm speaking to you with Miss Jeannie MacDonald, who is also not a victim, but a survivor of gender-based violence here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Certainly.
Mr. Williams, are we with you now? Okay, it would appear that we have lost him. Okay, I think you're muted, so if you unmute yourself, Mr. Williams, we can get you back on.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Okay.
What I'm saying, I just had two of the regular listening audience, one from the UK and one even from home in St. Vincent. They're saying that the background noise is not clear. So I don't know if there's anything you can look into technically to see if you can improve on it. So it's not just myself.
Okay.
You have even listening right in St. Vincent having the same feedback.
Also, I'm not sure if, okay, right, so we have spoken to management. Is that better now?
Hello?
Yes, is that better? Are you hearing us better?
It's just It's a little bit better, but
Okay.
even when I speak to you now,
Yes.
there's a echoing with my voice as I speak, so it's kind of, I know it do clear from time to time, but
Okay.
this
Oh, we not
afternoon
hearing the echo.
it's not good.
Okay.
So I can't really hear what you and Mrs. Oliver say.
Okay. All right. So we were talking a little bit before you came back on. We are talking a little bit about our experiences and the perception that society have, or members of society, some members, not all, some members of society would have of persons. Well, both of us were in the civil service and the teaching profession at one point in time, and within the church community, and of course within the wider community. And you start talking about being a victim at one point, and then now as being a survivor of domestic violence or gender-based violence, and some people did not or do not believe that these things would have happened to us, or we would have experienced those things. I once heard a preacher said that evil walks in jackets and tie, and evil also wears hats and bags and shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Williams, your comments from the perspective of a man.
I don't think I hear you. If you don't, if you mind, just repeat for me a second time because I just want to make sure I hear you clearly so I can respond properly.
Gender-based
I'm
violence,
trying my best to hear you.
okay, from a man's perspective. Were you ever,
Uh-huh.
were you ever beaten up by a woman? And I know some men may be afraid to talk about that. But were you ever beaten by a man, a woman? Or maybe you don't want to talk about that.
Honestly, I'm not even hearing you properly, so I don't think it is fair for me to respond because I'm not hearing you properly.
Mr. Williams, there's something wrong with your end because what we are hearing loud and clear in the studio. I listened online, it's loud and clear, and there's something with your end that isn't doing properly. So we're listening online, we're listening from our substation channel, we hear you loud and clear. Okay. Something not really working.
Okay, so you're hearing, are you hearing now?
But we get that every week, and then it clears up. So it's not like it's and then I said to you, there's someone from the UK and someone from home who mentioned about it.
Okay, alright. Your
It's not just
thoughts,
myself.
okay. So your thoughts on gender-based violence from a man's perspective, are you hearing now?
Okay. What I
Turn that on because
well, I know from beginning because
sound off the fan.
the whole system was actually geared about men actually being in control of almost everything. I know a lot of abuse or violence have taken place, but what I keep saying, I think in order for we to, instead of we talk about the violence being received, I think they always the best way to approach this whole gender is
It's
to
too.
first address what is causing people to react. What I think we are doing is like as they say, you have the carriage before the horse. So I'm not disregarding the violence that whatever gender may receive, but I feel that we're not approaching it in a more holistic way. That to find out exactly what is causing people to be violent. Because if we don't address the cause,
Right.
there's no point of we talking about the statistics because it will keep repeating if we don't address the cause, and then eventually we are more in a position to address the cause and come to a solution. So that would be my approach to the question, not just talking about the statistics or not denying the victim, but let us first address what caused people to be violent.
Okay, so I want to flip this back on you a little bit from a man's perspective. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
would cause a woman to hit not just you, but any man? What do you think that would cause, some of the reasons that would cause a man to be abused by his wife or his woman. I am told, and
Well,
someone sent me this a few minutes ago, and they said violence has no sex or race. In fact, studies show that more men are abused than women. They didn't say what studies. They simply don't report to the police because they are mocked. And I've had about 5 comments stating that when men go to the police stations in St. Vincent to make
well,
a report, the men are actually mocked.
mm,
So,
well, it's interesting that, as I said, I'm not denying the females who have actually, because abuse is abuse. But one of the things as men that we have suffered from for decades is that the law is actually good, especially, of course, I'll begin when, if a man is being raped by a woman, the mindset of society is that number one, you go to the police, there's no real urgency. And you may even get a lot of reaction, but you should be happy if a woman rape you. So if a man is being raped by a woman, which it does happen, it is not being dealt with as serious as if it's the opposite.
uh-huh.
And that is something that's been happening to us as men for centuries because of cultural perception, and that is something that hasn't been addressed. So it's kind of interesting to see. I'm not saying women are not being abused, but then if you don't have the statistics of the men who have been abused for decades, how can you say that women are more being abused? Because we have actually felt it's no point reporting it because you're going to look at as soft, you're going to look at as stupid, and men and society wise, the system, they're not going to react to it with the urgency as if it's opposite. Secondly,
Uh-huh.
one of the major abuse we go through as men is that whenever you have any separation of family, automatically, without any real assessment to find out who is the more capable parents of taking care of the child, automatically those child go to the mother. Now, there are women who are not good parents just as bad as men who are not good fathers. So to date, that statistic that law is not adjusted properly to give us that fair parental ownership. So whenever there's a breakup, we always have to go and take the mother to court to get ownership and to get visiting rights or even parental visit. And even sometimes the woman can always, for whatever reason, refuse, in spite that there might be a legal agreement which is actually enacted by law, and a woman can always violate that. And instead of that woman is being dealt with for breaking the agreement, we have to take that woman back to court again.
My brother,
Also,
Uh-huh.
physical violence, when
Yes.
it comes to physical violence, it almost take the same reaction like rape, because you can't go out and say my wife beat me because they call you a dotish man. The people who look who are local, they call you a stupid man, they call you soft. So you know who don't want to be looked as stupid or soft, you just keep quiet. But yet again, that man, after a few years of being suppressed, he might instantly react, but nobody sees the years of silence, years of suppression. We are only going to see the final reaction, and that is not going to say that man or male who have reacted over so many years of suppression, he is right to react that way. But what I'm saying is that is the perception of how men are being dealt with when it comes to family separation, rape from women, and violence from women. So, from a man perspective, this is actually what I can mention with regard to, because I have a lot of close friends or who I consider brothers who actually have suffered um, sexual rape, um, violent violent attack by women and separation when it comes to family.
Okay. Over the years, you go ahead.
I just wanted to respond, my brother. A woman can't rape a
Yeah.
man because according to our legislation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you have to prove penetration. A woman can't penetrate a man. Okay?
Yes.
That's the first
I was
thing.
going, I was going to come.
I cannot penetrate you no matter how I try.
Now
Okay?
I was going to
that's
comment
to,
on that,
So
but
that's
we
one.
have to
yes.
understand.
Okay, I just
Rape
want
taking rape can be happening in many different ways.
yes,
Okay.
but I'm telling you,
Okay.
but our law, you
law
have to
does
prove
say so.
penetration. Okay, that's one.
Mhm.
When we talk about the statistics, we have to go with what is reported. We can't suppose
And that
what
is
is
it.
not reported.
That is the
So
problem.
we have to deal with,
With
what,
what is-
comes before the court,
Correct,
what
correct.
goes
Comes
to the
before
police, and
marrying
what
house.
goes to the
Yes.
structures or the mechanisms in place.
Division
So
of
we
Gender
can
Affairs,
only
family
only
court.
give
Yes.
statistics based on what is brought to us or what we know. We can't suppose, we can't suggest. We have to go with what is on the book, what we have dealt with. Okay? So in terms of the stats, and there is maybe years ago when well, in those days we didn't say gender-based, we said domestic violence
Domestic violence,
because,
yes,
and even today we refer to domestic violence. Sometimes it is used interchangeably, but we have structures, we have mechanisms in place, and we have a process, and then we have legislation. So it isn't like during my day, there was no legislation. I mean, we had to fight, actually speak with government on a regular basis and let them realize the gravity of the situation before we had the legislation put in place. And the legislation is gender neutral. All the legislation on our books are gender neutral. So it isn't, years ago, it was in favor of our men. Like, and I could rattle off a number of them for you, where I didn't have the authority and the power and the control to apply for citizenship for my daughter that I carried for 9 months and gave birth to. I am the only person that counted the rafters in the roof at the hospital when I gave birth. But I could not pass on my Vincentian citizenship to her. It had to be done by her father. And I'm only using that to show that the legislation was very gender biased. So now that we have a number of pieces of gender neutral legislation which relates to equity with men and women, then we have a number of mechanisms or structures in place to address the issue of gender-based violence. And we have made certain through the educational programs that we have implemented and continue to implement. There is recognition that men too, gender-based violence, that men too are victims of gender-based violence, and that women also perpetrate.
Right. So while not mentioning the words gender-based violence, the Domestic Violence Act, I went and I did a beginner's guide to the St. Vincent and Grenadines Domestic Violence Act in 2015, and as a PhD holder of law, I went and I did this. I extracted from the booklet, I extracted from the law, and I did, this. It's unpublished, and I'm going to read, because I did a synopsis of each year. What is what's the Domestic Violence Act number 7 of 2015? And I'm talking here about how can you use the St. Vincent and Grenadines Domestic Violence Act to protect oneself. Once you have experienced and are experiencing abuse that is coming from a person with whom you are in a domestic relationship, and you are experiencing or is experiencing one or more types of abuse that are explained with the domestic violence within the context of the Domestic Violence Act, you need to look at this legislation. While not in support or condoning the homosexual lifestyles, remember, the person who has abused you or is abusing you can be a man or a woman with whom you are familiar. Some women can and do abuse other women, and that, I think, is the point you are making. And men can and do abuse other women. Once child abuse is known, you are advised to report this to the police at your earliest and safest conveniences. And I went on to look at three main areas as well. What's the purpose of it? The act provides you, the abused, with information and guidance as to how to get a protection order legally against the person who is your abuser. The protection order is designed to protect you, the abused, from the abuser, and if he or she continues to commit more acts of domestic violence against you, the abused, and once the abuser continues to commit acts of domestic violence against you, the abused, the protection order should outline those acts, and the abuser can be arrested and be taken to court for his disobedience, so outlined in the protection order. And I went on to describe what is what's a domestic relationship, and I did that for a particular publication in 6 different series, and that can be made available to the general public at probably a small cost and contribution towards our program going forward. But what I'm hoping to do with these programs is to bring a measure of balance to what is actually happening here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to reach outside of myself and into the boundaries of other people's lives, or across the boundaries, I should say, into other people's lives, and touch lives and help us to understand that survivors of domestic abuse or gender-based violence is right among us, and we are here to support one another, and that is true. It's easy to give in. That's one of the things that I have learned from my experiences, that when somebody comes at me and they start shouting and carrying on, I have a tendency to, and folks, very good friends will say, but you just tend to give in quickly instead of holding on to your point. I want to say as well to those who are listening to me that we must live intentionally, and as to what it is we are doing, we must live intentionally. We must help others. When we see that there is a problem in society, don't wait or don't say to yourself, well, that is Doris' then problem, that is Jeannie then problem. It could never come to my home, because I was under that misconception. Yes, I was under that misconception at one point to say that could never happen to me, but it did. And when I pushed past the shame, because for me, it came with a bit of a shame. When I pushed past the stuff that is inside of my head to say, well, look, you may have brought that upon yourself, I begin to grow. I begin to understand me. That some people may say, well, boy, you have to have done the man with something. You have to have done something in order for him to behave that way. And I'm saying each one of us as adults, we are responsible for our actions, and the way we process problems should be, you can't tell me a man will just sit down under normal circumstances and just say, well, I have to say under normal circumstances, okay, I'm going to chop you up.
Yeah.
And when I finish chopping you up, I'm going to throw you over the bank.
Yeah.
And I have learned in life that if a duck quacks and say, I'm a duck, believe that duck.
It's a duck. Yeah.
Our children, those of us who have children or significant others, especially young people who are living within the confines of our homes or in an extended family, when they hear these things, they too are affected. And that's why last week I was trying to reach out to the young people of this nation and beyond to let them know that there are things that they can do in terms of saying no to domestic violence, no to gender-based violence, the way you dress, the places you go, the foods you eat. Everything should be in accordance with what you as an individual has been taught by your parents, and in a normal society, so to speak, as normal as can be, what we call normal, we should not tolerate anything that resembles gender-based violence, domestic violence, psychological violence, you name it.
But
Yes.
my brother asked about the root causes. We first have to look at the root causes. We did in our last program, this whole business of gender-based violence is something that is learned. It's the way we are socialized in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's learned behavior. And we practice it, it is being practiced so much in our homes that we have learned and we don't have a choice. You know, a habit is an action repeated so often that it has become second nature. There is patriarchal and sexist views that are expressed within our homes. There's the whole business of dominance and superiority of our men, as my cousin here indicated a while ago. There's the whole business of they want to keep you, want to exercise power, to control you. The way in which we are socialized, man, we got all the cultural factors that include the gender stereotyping and the prejudices within our society. And within our schools, with our learning institution. What is expected of us as being male and what is expected of us as being female. Even the choices we make in our professions. And the whole business that whatever happens within the family sphere must be considered private and confidential. Nonsense. And because of that, we must accept the gender-based violence as part of our public sphere. So when I walk on the street, everybody wants to harass me, sexually harass me because I wear my short skirt. How many men and them wearing the short pants? I don't interfere with them. So it is an acceptable means. The gender-based violence, domestic violence, is an acceptable means of us resolving conflict and asserting ourselves. And it goes back to the whole religious and historical traditions that have sanctioned the physical punishment of a woman under the notion of entitlement and ownership of us. You understand?
I want to throw this into the mix. I want to do a little roll call. These persons are either dead or disappeared from St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a result of some form of violence. Velon Samuel Vermont, a guy they call Thomas from Kittels, Scooby from Kittels, Bashi from Kittels, Sonny Gums from Vermont, Tiger from Vermont, Blogo from Vermont, Gunto, my cousin brother Finch from Vermont, Malcolm Polin from Vermont, Holly from Vermont, Brother Wilson from Vermont, Luan Roberts from Harmony Hall. There was a little boy who died recently in the car. Precious Williams, who died recently. Yolan Weeks, one of our students at the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Girls High School. An officer who shot a robber. The robber is dead and one is in hospital. A nurse from Cuba, I can't remember that nurse recently. Nurse Israel as well. Nurse Rogers killed by Mark the lawyer. 3 police officers are dead. Chambers in Kittels, Constable Chambers, he was shot reportedly by someone close to him. There was a lady in Park Hill recently. She died, killed by her partner. There is a Glassie Lewis' son. He was a deportee from the United States. There's a man whose neck was chopped off in Kittles. There's Snyder's brother. Uh, then there are young persons losing their lives for marijuana. We talk about an amnesty, but an amnesty until when? Bashi is still missing. I mentioned his name before. Rumpo is missing. General Ricardo, we call him General Ricardo Samuel from Kittles, missing. Bruds Wilson from Vermont, missing. Kiba, Shaka from Sign Hill. Miranda, Rasta Lady in Rillan Hill. Scatterhorn from Kittles. Michael Williams from Kittles. And of course, we know that Compey died in prison. And that's Compey Trimmingham from the Vermont area. I call these because these are the areas in which I would have been living. But the thing about it is that if we take a roll call, somebody conservatively put the estimates from 1979 to now, they said it's something like 2,000 persons are dead. I don't know if that is as high as that. But the point I'm making when I did this roll call is that there's a call for justice in St. Vincent and Grenadines to be meted out to persons who are perpetrators of these crimes. Justice. Justice for the blood of our boys and girls speak. Yes, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I hear you, and I
Yes.
hear Mrs. Oliver as well. And as I said, I'm not disregarding justice. You understand me?
Yes.
But what I still feel that we're not doing,
Yeah.
because now if we go into the causes of something, and you could address the causes, I'm not saying it's going to stop violence, but it will make a much more bigger impact than we just think about having justice. Because it's interesting too when you go into the cause of violence, and I have two credible sources, one from the UK and one from the US side of things. And what both of them have in common are things that we are now accepting as normal in our society. Some of them we are also aware of some of the causes. But two red light factor, which is considered legal, alcohol. But if you're going to say now we're going to ban alcohol consumption, now that's going to cause a big problem because it's going to cause a lot of people being out of job. You have a lot of shop who their main source of income is actually alcohol. So then this is going to cause a big divide. Now you have the use of drugs, which is not legal, but again, these are some of the issues that we're having that is plaguing our society. And the other thing that came up common as to the causes of violence, we're talking about video game. Now, when you start creating that as normal within the young minds, now we are actually ringing an alarm bell now about violence. Miss Oliver, yourself and I, we grew up in an era where violence was always there, but it's not as rampant as it is now. So if we are accepting alcohol as normal, and we know that cause a significant impact on a lot of violence, and that is accepted as legal. We have video games because before alcohol used to be used by adults. But now we have video games, which is impacting the young minds, and this is not only men. What kind of society are we creating looking for the next 2 or 3 decades ago? So I am not disregarding justice, but I think we are kind of putting the cart before the horse by not addressing what are the causes. It's just like
Okay.
you have a tire, and instead of you either repair it or
Right.
buy a new tire, you keep patching it.
Well, according to the American Psychological Association, they were commenting on a number of topics. One of them was gun violence and crime. Violence is an extreme form of aggression, such as assault, rape, or murder. And violence has many causes, including frustration with life itself, frustration with um, the situation of poverty, frustration with unemployment, and so on. Exposure to violent media, violence in the home or neighborhood, and a tendency to see other people's actions as hostile even when they are not. Now, Belly Nation, through BayHillNews.net, we are coming to you live from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. BayHillNews.net is about radical radio. But BayHillNews.net and Belly Nation, we've come together in this context, and that is, we don't for one moment think that we will reshape St. Vincent and the Grenadines through one program. But the idea is to, one step at a time, try to help our listeners understand, scratch the surface, so to speak, as we are doing right now, to understand, yes, there are a number of issues, number of causes related that give way or create, violence, which is an extreme form of aggression and so on. But we are hoping that our listeners would also turn the searchlight inwards into our society, our rural communities and so on. And we are hoping that St. Vincent and the Grenadines and those who are listening to my voice, our voices, wherever they are, will become conscious somehow. As a Christian as well, we are saying how you deal with conflict, that is critical. I try to be as fair and as balanced as possible. I don't want to come to, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, you're a Roman Catholic, and I'm not sure to which denomination you belong to, Mr. Williams, but we're trying to be as fair as possible, as open-minded as possible, to give a platform to persons to say, look, this is not the way you handle conflict. This is not the way you handle frustration. Picking up a gun and shooting your wife. Sitting down on a bed that you share with your wife and say, look, if you continue to talk to me any old how, if you continue to quarrel with me, if you continue to say something that I don't like, what I'm going to do, the first thing is I'm going to kill you. How dare that person say those things to their wives or partners? Either way, that is men or women, men speaking to men or women speaking to men, and so on. The exposure to violent media, who controls that? Aren't we parents who buy these little gadgets for our children and bring them into the homes? Or we give a nation 30, 40,000 video games or 40,000 laptops without the requisite guidance as to when they should look at what. And what would you expect? That they use them willy-nilly. Some children mash them up, some parents don't care, and so on. So before you advance a program like that, sit down, talk to the parents, educate the Parent Teachers Association in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Say, look, at this time, you know when some parents tell me about, he's 7 years old and me can't go with him. It's 15 years old and lad, when we lock it door at night time, she does climb through the window and come back in. In whose house? You are the parent. I think in terms of parenting, we might have to have a program on that. How do you continue to be good parents, so to speak? When my mother and my father said to me, and I'm talking here now generally, parents in your community in Vermont and other places here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when they say, listen, you cannot go such and such. We can't. Because in those days, is what? A village raised a child.
No.
You can't, just some parents will tell you can't do this and you can't do that. So parents must take responsibility for the way they allow their children to be exposed to some aspects of media. And if violence comes into that, then parents should take responsibility for that. And then violence in the home and in the neighborhood. No longer you will see two guys hitting one another with a fist, like a fist fight, and then afterwards they quiet. Fellas holding on to one another and they chop you up. One man run back home for a cutlass the other day and I had to be bawling out. I saw a child standing up, pick up a stone to pelt after her father. And I have to say, are you crazy, child? put down the stone. I nearly get involved there. I had to be bawling out, put down the stone, that is your father. And I'm saying that things have changed radically in terms of parent-child relationship, child and child relationship, husband and wife relationship, and so on, and partner to partner relationship. So the structure of family has broken down. Yes, the structure of the family has broken down. And then the church seems helpless. I'm not saying they are helpless, but they seem helpless to address some of these issues, because sometimes where we are concerned, Seventh Adventists, you come to church once, you probably 9 to 12, 9 to 1. In terms of instructional time as to how you teach parenting classes and so on. No, it's non-existent. You may have a program that targets family or parents or you name it, but that's about it until the next cycle of those programs coming on. So who teach our parents? And somebody told me the other day, well, they never went to university to become a parent. So yeah, so frustration with life and life issues, exposure to violence media, violence in the home or the neighborhood, and a tendency to see other people's actions as hostile even when they are not. Society has changed, and members of our society, specific to gender-based violence, must grasp that and say, okay, this is our society, we will change it this way. But without the grace of God in people's lives, then that moral compass as to what is right and wrong is not going to be there.
Yeah.
So yes.
You see, you have other factors that cause the gender-based violence. You have the legal factors.
Okay.
I mean, when you're a victim or a survivor, I mean, it's not easy. It is perceived in our society as a victim or a survivor, it's considered shameful and weak. With making the survivor or the victim feel guilty for attracting the violence against themselves through their behavior. And this accounts for enduring the low levels of reporting and investigation. I mean, until recently, our laws differentiated between the public and the private sphere, which left victims and perpetrators vulnerable, particularly our victims. And then you talked about the practice of our law enforcement officers, which most of the time favors our perpetrators and help to account for the low levels of trust in public authorities. And for the fact that most of these crimes go unreported. You know, there's a whole business of economic factors. You don't have the resources to go before the court to put your case to the court, and that is why two of the things I wanted for the establishment of the family court was one, that you garnish wages where there's the men not supporting the children or the woman not maintaining the children. You garnish the wages once they were employed. And the other thing was that to keep lawyers out of the family court, let the family deal with it. So the lack of economic resources makes the victim, makes the survivor vulnerable to violence, because it creates a pattern of violence and poverty that becomes self-perpetuating and makes it extremely difficult for victims to extricate themselves, particularly when employment and poverty affect us, as this can cause, especially if it affects men, it can cause them to assert their masculinity through violent means. You know, there are all the political factors as well. The underrepresentation of women in power and politics, so that you have few opportunities available to them to shape discussions and to affect changes in policy, and to adopt measures to combat the gender-based violence and to support equality.
So,
you know? So we have to look at the other causes as well, the political, the economic, the social, causes and the impact on the gender-based violence.
Would you say, Mr. Williams, you have lived in St. Louis for years. Would you say, and you have been in law enforcement, would you say that sexual violence is serious and pervasive within our society? And I want to do a
Um,
retrospective and a sort of yes, retrospective look, and compare it to what you know of in St. Vincent currently. That sexual
well, you
violence.
see,
Mhm.
I heard what Mrs. Holiday is saying, and I do agree with a lot of things that she said. I mean, what we need to also understand that we are living in this internet age, and it has a lot of advantages in terms of when you are going to school. If you don't have a textbook, the other alternative is the library, and if the library is closed, then that's it for you. Now we live in an age where information is available at hand, but there are other not also information. There are other things that is exposed to our children. And if you remember a few weeks back, I asked if we would allow a stranger into walk through your house, pass you without say good afternoon, and go straight in your bedroom and spend the rest of the evening or night there with your child. Because what's happened now, it doesn't matter what parental control we are talking about to put on the internet, it's inevitable. For the ordinary man, impossible. Because these children are growing up in an age where they understand the technology more than we do. So whatever parental control you're talking about implemented, these children would know how to override it. Now the whole world becomes so sexualized, and I still am advocating for we have to address the source. You have you want to sell a tire, just a tire, or you just want to sell a car, or you look at when the boxing match, when they announce the rounds,
Yes.
when they announce the winner, a woman is just half naked. Now, I'm not saying it is okay for a man to go and rape a woman, but everybody' mental capacity is not the same level. So once you constantly portray this sexual image in front of men, especially there's some men who don't even have the confidence to approach a woman, don't even have, they never had a woman. I'm not saying it's okay, so I don't want to be misquoted. What are we doing to those weak men or men who are not capable of resisting that kind of sexual, constant sexual images that is displayed before them? Are we surprised at what's going on? So what I'm saying, our society right now is on a collision course because even when, say for example, I commit a sexual act, the victim is traumatized. But when I go to prison, what system do we have in place to make sure that I, who the person who committed the sexual act, will be able to reintegrate it in society? Because justice for us is that I commit a sexual act, the victim traumatized mentally, still traumatized because there's no rehabilitation in place, and I'm talking about consistent rehabilitation for the victim. And me, I've gone into prison, and that's justice. This is where we are going wrong because men go into prison, and there's not a collective body that work with these men consistently to make sure that they don't reoffend, or also to work with them to make sure that that sexual weakness that you have in your mind is actually being repaired. So we have to work holistically, as Ms. Olivier said. We have to make sure that we have proper institution in place and we work collectively. So even yes, justice is done, we need to work with that person in prison to make sure that that person do not reoffend, or we get to the root of what causes him or her to react in a sexual or violent way they have reacted. So it is a holistic approach, and justice is not the solution. It's only part of it.
Okay.
I hear you loud and clear, but there are designated positions, designated personnel within the government service that receive a salary and that are paid on a regular
Uh-huh.
basis. And
Yeah.
the issue is them getting out of their comfort zone in their chairs and going out to the institutions and the communities to do their work.
Hold on. You know, when you talk like that, I just have to rebut. What you mean that they're tied to their chairs?
Yes.
So they can't move from their offices?
No, their offices. So
So
they
they are-
sit in an office.
Okay, so they are based in office.
Yes.
But their responsibility or the job letter say that they're
Yes.
supposed to be visiting institutions.
Yes. And you have there in the prison itself,
Right.
there is a probation officer who is paid and whose responsibility is to do exactly that. And if she finds that she can't do it alone, you deal with collaboration. You advocate or you network so that you can get things done because you alone can't do it. But that is your particular responsibility. So you have to use your own initiative. And it's not just in prison, it's not only the men in prison, but also the women or the men who are outside, who are the victims and want to be survivors. And that is why within the government service and in collaboration with Marion House, we are working with victims who are now going to become survivors,
Yes.
so that we can address the issue holistically,
Okay.
so that they don't just have education, they have knowledge of the process, they have knowledge of the piece of legislation, but they also have psychosocial issues that they're experiencing addressed.
I noticed here that somewhere in 2018, because you see, when it talks about training and development and ongoing training and how we're going to push St. Vincent forward, because this whole thing about the Office of Drugs and Crime, the United Nations, Human Rights Council and Human Rights Commissioner, they observe what is happening, they receive reports from agencies like yourself and so on. We have the Universal Periodic Review that comes up when we address issues of violence and crime and so on, and it affects us. Generally speaking, it affects us in terms of our ability to attract investors. So the climate, the criminal, quote unquote, the violent, quote unquote, climate that exists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is projected outwards because we are not living in a vacuum. We are a country, we are a sovereign state, a sovereign foreign state to every other state in the whole world. We are identifiable as a sovereign state, having gained our independence in 1979, and we are supposed to be standing out there as an international partner of many other island states, wherever they are. And so, keeping our criminal elements to a level that is practically minuscule or very low, because it's coping with domestic violence. There are some criminal elements that we won't be getting rid of soon, because crime has become, endemic within our societies. There was a training workshop, domestic violence intervention and prevention, according to the news. St. Vincent Times talk about what this is the 15th of February 2018. That's as much as I could pick up. I'm not sure. That's 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. 4 years has passed. And I'm not sure what's happening with the National Council of Women who organized that workshop then. They invited various community groups and told that the community groups are non-existent. Faith-based groups and any other person or persons to attend a one-day training workshop on domestic violence, intervention and prevention. That was sometime in February of that year. My thing about it is that if you can't have a one-week workshop, you have a one-day workshop with the trainers, and there is supposed to be someone now to monitor the how do you call that? Another series of workshops where these trainers will now turn around and train others, because this first one was train the trainers. We are losing it. We are losing the battle on this issue, and we need to talk about it and bring back St. Vincent and the Grenadines from the brink of destruction,
Yes.
because we're going wrong.
We cannot do anything, as I said in our previous program. It is not government's business. This is a national issue. And we have to address the issue of gender-based violence, domestic violence, whatever name we want to call it, from a holistic perspective. All the stakeholders, the churches, the NGOs, the government agency have to be involved. And that is why, at present, we are, and I am talking about the Ministry of National Mobilization, through the Gender Affairs Division and the Marian House, we have organized and we have been going to communities throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where we've been speaking not only to possible survivors, but we have also been speaking to the general public. Every Wednesday at Marian House for the past, since the beginning of the year, we have been working with the possible survivors, where we look at the stage at where they are and where they would want to go. Right? Moving from victim to permanent survivors, and because they are part and parcel of a domestic violence support group, which is inclusive of men and women. It's gender-based.
I'm talking to Miss Jeannie Oliver here on Belden Nation, being sponsored by BayHillNews.net. BayHillNews.net. Check us out on the net. My name is Doris Charles, and with us all the way from the Bailiwick of Jersey is Mr. Gerald Williams, financial analyst, father, concerned Vincentian, and advocate for peace and justice in our land. He was a former law enforcement officer here as well. And we've come together on this platform to say to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and to say to members of our diaspora who are listening to us or who are looking at us, that we are in a crisis mode, and we need to raise the bar on what we do as Vincentian nationals. We are brilliant people. We know what we should know what we're doing, by way of just being able to cope with the stresses of life. And we are not immune from issues that touch and concern crime and criminal elements all over the world. But St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 110,000 persons. We have out of that approximately 89,000 voters, and we extract from that, half of that, about 40,000 women in St. Vincent and Grenadines. I'm talking to a quarter of those women this afternoon. We should lead a special march, a special rally on this issue, and call attention to the rest of St. Vincent and Grenadines. 10,000 women I'm talking to, that we should come together and organize a very special rally and continue to wake up this nation and to tell us that we are going the wrong way. And I'm saying that we can't do anything without our prayers, without the support of our pastors and leaders within the church communities. I know some persons are advocating about something else, but we are saying that without God, without vision, a people perish. So this concept of gender-based violence does not appear in the laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I'm told. And the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, one of the reports I was picking up in 2017, it says that it is important to note that according to CEDAW recommendation in that year, that's a general obligation on the state of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to adopt in their legislation prohibitions on all forms of gender violence against women and children. And you see the emphasis on women and children because that is more reported, Mr. Williams,
That's why we
than,
have the stats.
than men. So you have more information about women and children than men per se. And that there is a call to harmonize the domestic laws with United Nations Convention, recommending the duty to ensure that all forms of gender-based violence in all spheres that are equivalent to psychological, physical, sexual, or psychological integrity violations are criminalized. Yes, Mr. Williams.
It just kind of get me a bit. When we talk about UN, I mean, we tend to always see this UN. How much you feel like when we talk about, as Mrs. Oliver talked about statistics,
Yes.
how much statistics do we need from the UN to see that they are not acting in the best interest of what the melanated people? And let us start to create something for ourselves because I can't understand why we always have to get accreditation from the UN because if we have
Hold on.
data
Hold
to,
on.
to
It is
that
not
one,
getting.
let me finish my
Oh,
point.
sorry. Go ahead.
Let me
Go
finish
ahead.
my point.
Go ahead.
Because we seem to like can't actually create something for ourselves. I know the UN is an international body, but it has been proven there is sufficient data that they're not there acting in our best interest. We are capable, we are sovereign country, we have enough brains. Look you have Mrs. Oliver, she have been through, she just explained the amount of trauma that she has been through, and I give her a lot of credit to come out, even yourself, and
Thank
let
you.
this be like a voice to awake the people because we are sovereign people, sovereign nation, and we are capable of running ourselves without this UN that we always need accreditation for, and they're not acting in our best interest. And if we want data, it can be provided. So let us start to think that we are capable of managing symbols without UN approval, and we are capable. I don't know why we are cherry picking our fruit because if we want to actually resolve something, we have to be able to call a spade. And if the UN is also part of them, and we have to address it straight, and let us stop pretending that we don't know what the UN stands for.
Yeah, but I think she
We
was
can't want to
speaking.
address something and we're not speaking truth.
I think my brother, she was speaking about the report that we usually have to send to the UN. And it's not just done by the government. Government will send to say what they want to say, what they feel like saying. But then the NGO movement also has a responsibility, as I was saying earlier, that all of us are stakeholders in the process. Is not only government, so government could make their report nice and dandy, but we as NGOs also have a responsibility. And that is why I keep saying that the support of agencies to uphold their responsibility and to ensure that people of concern are protected against gender-based violence. The government agencies, the people who work with them, need to do their work so that the rest of us can also contribute. But they are paid. The NGO do not have the monies that government have allocated. They have taxation. But we will work because we realize that we have a role to play. And we don't wait on the UN to set an agenda for us.
That's right.
We have, as the NGO movement, and I can speak because Marion House coordinates a 25 national level NGO. And we meet and we speak on the issues nationally. So we don't depend on the UN. If we wait on the UN, we get nothing, we'll get nowhere. The UN will give all the monies to the government agencies, but it's still government agencies. They are not upholding their responsibility and ensuring that our victims and our perpetrators are reintegrated and rehabilitated into our Vincentian society. We just ostracize them. Or you bad, you kill, you whatever, Extension Society and I live here too. So all of us have to
I agree.
survive. So we have to look out for each other. So don't tell me that because you perpetrate, I leave you alone and only deal with the victim. No, I have to deal with the perpetrator because at some point they're coming out of jail and they're going to be part and parcel of the society again. And this is why I'm saying that the agencies, the government agencies who have specialized responsibility must do their work and not do it one time,
Mrs.
but
Oliver,
it has to be over ongoing. Yes, I'm listening.
what I will say is that as I said, I have to commend you for wherever you find the strength to speak out. Now, a few years ago, we can use the same media platforms to work on in in our advantage in terms of community development. Now, we have a culture that we have been dominated by loyalty to party, and it's for a long time that, as you mentioned, that the the offices that are representing St. Vincent and Grenadines are not being held accountable. So what we can do, I'm just suggesting, because we have this media platform, there might be people who don't feel confident to actually approach these institutions. They could either come to you, Mrs. Charles, or also email Building Nation, because email is there, and we could use as a mediator to actually approach these senior officers or officers who are not held accountable, and we give them time to resolve what needs to be resolved. And if not, we use the same media platform to actually call them to action. Because I agree with you that wherever that person is in terms of neglect or of crime commit, we can't leave them because they are part of Civics.
So there are two comments, well, two questions. Who is responsible for doing this wickedness in St. Vincent? Company to talk about crimes. And why can't they lock up all those who are perpetrators? Questions. Who is responsible for doing this wickedness in St. Vincent? And why can't they lock up all those who are perpetrators? Can we lock up every perpetrator in St. Vincent and the Grenadines if we have a jail?
We have any place. That's why they build a new jail
Yes.
instead of getting rid of the jail that is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And run some rehabilitative and reintegrative program.
Yeah.
Instead of doing that.
Yeah.
Right? You're building another jail.
Mm-hmm.
For what? For who? The young people?
Hmm.
The young people are my future, and if you put them in jail, who going to be my leaders? I need my young people to lead me. I need to hold discussions with them.
Correct.
You know, I just finished speaking to those in Kingston, and I'm saying to them, the people in the ministry sit, as I say, in an office, and they decide what should be done or not should be done.
Mm-hmm.
They're not coming to speak with the people.
Mm-hmm.
That is why you have the National Council of Women, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That has been there because they're not getting the support from the ministry or the agency or the department that is supposed to walk along with them. Same thing with the National Youth Council. There's no National Youth Council. We used to have one vibrant National Youth Council in this country. Every single secondary school had a student body. Everyone, every community had a youth group. Every church had a youth group. Nothing functioning anymore. So where does the issues? Where's the platform for the youth to address their challenges and their issues? Who listening to them? When you are sitting in
Let
a
us
chair,
create
you're not
one.
coming out.
How can we address,
Let us create one.
how can we address this issue again? How can we go back to the situation of, well, I will always call people's Andrew Simmons' name,
Yes,
Rosita
yes,
Snag, Sandra
yes,
Davis,
Yes.
and all those who, Miriam Roach and others
The
who,
people them don't have, they don't
fast.
feel, they're not motivated from the belly
oh,
goat.
you cut me off there, Jeannie MacDonald, well, Jeannie Oliver,
They don't understand
you know,
how you could get a salary and you're not
Clayton
functioning.
Baldwin, there was this guy King,
Yeah.
you know, Faustina, she used to be down with
Lois, and you had
Yeah, Faustina.
Jimmy Ford.
Jimmy Ford.
Yes. You know,
I learn on you guys, you know, I sit down and learn from you guys.
it's crazy.
You know, so where are the newer version of Jeannie Oliver? Where are the newer versions of Rosita Snag?
They have their degrees and they go, I don't know if it's Fahrenheit or Celsius,
Yeah.
but they have the degrees and they're going further up. And in terms of my brother, in terms of taking the theories that they have learned, the
yes.
concepts that they have learned, and making it work through programs and so
Within
on.
the schools,
Reality, nothing is
within the
happening.
community.
Nothing is happening.
Who restarts the community?
No, nobody don't
organization?
visit communities. Are you mad? We used to have community officers, community development officers, we had youth officers, we have women's affairs officers that went out in the community and targeted these groups, these specialized groups, organized them, sat and did strat plans with them and helped them to implement the strat plans. No,
Ladies and
my
gentlemen.
brother, I agree with you that we need to ask them, get them to uphold the responsibility.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come almost to the end of this week's program and to the end of the month's program, where we focused on women and women's issues. I want to thank you so much for listening to us. We are designed to be creatures, persons within St. Vincent and Grenadines, citizens that are concerned about what is happening here. Creatures from the Creator's hand, God Almighty, and we are bent on reshaping St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The change of the law, call to the designated officers here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, mobilization and community awareness. And we want to thank you, Ms. Jeannie Oliver and Mr. Gerard Williams, for gracing us with your presence and for making the discussions this week very lively and interactive. We thank you for sending in your comments. Sometimes I forget to thank persons for sending in your comments and your suggestions via the media. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I am Doris Charles, and until next time, Belly Nation wishes you a blessed evening and says, do continue to take care of yourself and your family. Be a change agent and be the change that you wanted to see. Goodbye, Belly Nation signing off. Until next time. Bye for now.
Bye.